Hello again, everyone, and a very happy new year to you all. Today I'm going to be showing you this new vintage Graflex that I've converted into the style of Luke Skywalker's hero lightsaber from The Empire Strikes Back. The base unit for this is a vintage Folmer variant of the Graflex 3-cell. Without the patent number, so that is the oldest and rarest of the three variants, I believe, and it is what is believed to be the most accurate type that was used in the original trilogy, but that is not confirmed. So let's just go ahead and look at this from top to bottom. As you can see, it has a set of smooth pins on the side, which is typical for the Folmer variants. There's a little bit of rust there on the bunny ears band. Really just adds a little bit of more aging and character to it, if anything. Just a few spots of rust here and there, nothing major. Overall, it's a very good condition flash unit for something that's over 70, 80 years old. Nothing major at all. A little bit more rust here on the sidebar there, but overall, as I said, is quite clean. The original red button that was on it is also obviously a Folmer type, and the second red button that sits in the glass eye socket is a Folmer red button as well that I purchased separately. So it's nice that both of them are Folmers, so they match each other in their knurling, in their profile, in the color of the red button itself, because the ink variants are very slightly different. So that's just my personal preference. Over here you can see there's a little bit of natural aging to the bulb contact pin there. And here we can see the little brass rivet there on the side, and the absence of the divots that gives us away as a Folmer bunny ears. So the first thing I did to set this up as a ESB prop was obviously to remove the beer tab. The beer tab is not present in the Empire Strikes Back props, except for a couple of the stunt props, like in the Wampa Cave. But on the Bespin Cloud City hero variant, it's not present. So I went ahead and removed that. I just filed it from inside and tried to carefully remove it as best as I could without causing any scratches or damage. As I said, this came to me with a glass eye, which I have removed and now sold because it's not required for this variant, and I've replaced it with a Folmer red button, original vintage Folmer button, which I've purchased separately. Here, as I said before, there are the smooth pins, again with a nice bit of patina. So not much at all to be done up here other than remove the beer tab and replace the glass eye with a red button. Over here, the clamp. The Graflex stamping, the logo, was covered with this chrome tape that I purchased from Skywampa. That is an Etsy store here in the UK. WannaWanga also does these. I've used both. I have a slight preference to the Skywampa one. I just think the finish is a little bit more mirrored. It's very, very easy to apply and reapply if you mess up. I like it to be completely sort of parallel to both sets of stamped lines here, running across from side to side. Here we can see the Folmer lever with the small rusty pinhead, as opposed to the ink variant, which has a larger, more central machined rivet head. The square washer underneath is preserved, as opposed to A New Hope. And this clamp card is not a vintage, unfortunately. I do not own a vintage Otis board. Those are extremely hard to get a hold of and can be quite pricey. But this is as close as it gets. It has a beautiful vintage finish with the correct gold traces with those square piano-like appearance as opposed to TFA, which are a bit more rounded. And the silver solder there, these thin traces that you see protruding up that are off-center. They're not all from the C. You see some of them are from the right, some are from the left, some are a little bit more central, and that's how that is accurate for the ESB Otis. So this clamp card is available from Slothfurnace, and that is what I've used to build this. Moving down to the lower section, here we have some grips which I purchased from WannaWanga. These were pre-cut to the correct dimensions, the correct notch, so I didn't have to do much at all about that. So WannaWanga does excellent grips. I installed these with a grip guide that I purchased from Nate over at Iron Destiny Props. Before installing them, I went ahead and did a little bit of weathering that you may be able to see there. Just a few nicks and scratches randomly, and just weathered it up very gently with a little bit of sandpaper just to take off the sheen so they look a little bit more aged. I also did a little bit of weathering here in the notches. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see those little traces there. I just went ahead and filed down very subtly on all the notches, just to give the illusion that these have been cut by hand, which is obviously true of the original props. I don't know if you'd be able to see just a few marks here and there on both sides of the notches. It's a very subtle thing, but it's just my personal preference. These Phillips head screws are originally from an Exactra TI calculator. Mine are unfortunately again replicas. Exactra calculators can be found from time to time on eBay. Usually a calculator will go up to $200 to $300 if you're lucky. And each calculator will have 2 screws, so you really need 3 calculators. So you can imagine how much just these 6 screws could cost you. So I went ahead and bought the replicas from WannaWanga. These black ones, which are accurate for ESB, and I just weathered them slightly, just so they're not so sort of shiny or glossy. And I did not drill through this flash. I didn't want to do that. It's a vintage, so I cut down the screws, filed them down, so it's just a screw head basically, and I just glued it onto each individual grip. Over here on the pommel section, we have a Kobold assembly, which is a Kobold clip, a pair of 4mm rivets, and a D-ring. Now the D-ring and the rivets come from WannaWanga. The rivets were popped through the Kobold clip it, and the D-ring was mounted, and I did drill 2 holes into the bottom of the flash there just to pop them in. No, I didn't. Sorry, I apologize. I forgot. I didn't do that. I wanted to do that, and then I had second thoughts, and I thought, well, I'd rather just cut them down. So yeah, you could do that, but for this one, I chose not to go down that route. So I actually cut them down, as you can see here. So I popped the rivets outside of the flash, so it was just the head that was left, and then I cut them down with a Dremel and just stuck those into 2 holes and glued them onto the Kobold, so that and I secured the Kobold with a bit of double-sided tape. So it's not super secure, but it's quite a good hold. I'm not going to be hanging this on a belt or anything like that. It's just a display piece, so that's why I chose not to do any sort of permanent changes to the flash. The Kobold itself is a vintage Kobold. Replicas are available from WannaWanga. They look very, very accurate, but this is actually a vintage Kobold from a Kobold camera that came to me in a different Graflex. I was very fortunate to get this piece. This is the first time that I've done the Wampa Cave scene alignment. Normally I have the grips idealized with the central grip running through the middle of the clamp and the Kobold, but this time I went with the Wampa Cave. So if you look at in the Wampa Cave scene, we have the Kobold aligned this way, so that on the right side it says made by with the M slightly obscured, and on the other side ER New York. And this is exactly how it appears in the Wampa Cave scene with a Graflex in the snow like that. The word York is roughly parallel to the left side of the Kobold. And the Kobold itself, that tip, is pretty much in line with the clamp. As for the grips, normally I would line them up, so that grip, it goes directly on top of that one. But for this one, I chose to do the accurate Wampa Cave alignment, so it's a little bit off center. So that fin there of that track points to the right side of that clamp. And so I placed this by hand. I didn't use a grip guide. I just lined this up, just eyeballed it. And then I placed the grip guide on and used it for the other 5 grips, so that the corner of the Kobold there is in the middle of these 2 tracks. And then the rest of them just fall into place with the grip guide. And that is the accurate Wampa Cave alignment. So once again, Kobold is lined up with the clamp, with the rivets and the D-ring facing away. ER New York on one side, made by the Folmer on the other side. And then we start with that grip, slightly off to the right, so it points to the right sidebar. And then using a grip guide is the easiest way, just to line up the other 5. And that is the accurate Wampa Cave alignment. Everything else is preserved. Only the beer tab has been removed. That is the only permanent change that has been made to this flash. As I said, I did not drill holes for the screws. I did not drill holes to pop the rivets in. So yeah, that's basically it for this one. Once again, this is a vintage Folmer New York Graflex, built in the style of ESB Bespin Hero variant. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks a lot for supporting my channel, and I will see you in the next one.